Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of our audio podcast, Voices Unveiled, a platform where we bring women's stories from different corners of the world. I'm your host, Sumina. In this episode, we are joined by our friends from Karen Environmental and Social Action Network, or KESAN. Charlotte Clare and Sunita Kwangta joins us today, or Lottie and Mumu, respectively, as they are known by their friends. Charlotte is the Advocacy and Research Officer, while Sunita is the International Advocate for the Women Research Group. KESAN is a community-based, non-governmental, non-profit organization that works to improve livelihood security and to gain respect for Indigenous people's knowledge and rights in current state of Burma. KESAN's approach is based on the principles of democratization from below and free, prior, and informed consent to support the development of sustainable rural livelihoods. The organization was formed in 2001 by a group of motivated young Karen students and teachers on the Thai-Burma border. KESAN is also our restoration site partner in Myanmar. Today we will talk about Indigenous knowledge and how women contribute to the preservation and transmission of traditional knowledge and the incredible work being carried out by the Women Research Group in the Salaween Peace Park in Myanmar. So stay tuned. But before we delve into this engaging conversation, please do not be shy to subscribe or follow Women for Biodiversity on social media. Our handles are below in the description box. Your support is much appreciated. Hi, Charlotte and Sunita. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes, sure. Yeah, thanks for having us on. So my name's Lottie Clare, and I'm from the UK, but I've been working with Karen civil society organisations and environmental organisations for 5 or so years. So I've been working with the Karen Environmental Social Action Network, or KESAN, and I'm working with Mumu, my colleague, more and more these days on women and biodiversity issues. And I also work on research and advocacy as part of my role. And yep, that's me. And I'll hand it over to my colleague Mumu.
Okay, so my name is Sunita or Mumu. I'm working as an international advocate for Women Research Group. I also work with our Women Research team and also working with current Indigenous people who live in the current state in Burma.
Again, I'm very happy to have you two on this episode. So to start off the podcast, how would you explain Indigenous knowledge?
Indigenous, from my side, Indigenous knowledge like a citizen science. It is rooted in the area when Indigenous grow up. They are required to understand the knowledge for food, protection, and defend territories based on their knowledge. And also, I would like to share some experience when I took a middle school in Thailand. Most of my friends they consider me like as an ethnic person, but they did not really understand what is the Indigenous people or who I was, and myself I did not understand. So, but when I started to work in the KESAN, so I believe that I get to know that current people or Indigenous people, we have a culture, we have language, and then we have a way of life that which is friendly to nature. So this is very important. So basically, when I know myself, so it's good to share who I am to other people who doesn't know what is Indigenous people.
Yeah, and I think like coming from a perspective where I'm not Indigenous, I would say that Indigenous knowledge is exactly what Mumu said. Like, it's a science, it's wisdom, it's skills, culture that's rooted in like a long history of interaction with the environment that group is living in. And so quite often Indigenous knowledge is very relational, so based on relationships with other people, nature, and often spiritual entities as well, which is the case with Karen traditional Indigenous knowledge. So yeah, it's more of a holistic type of knowledge rather than compared to maybe Western scientific knowledge.
Yes, I completely agree with what both of you have said right now. And just to add to what Mumu had said earlier, I also come from an indigenous community in Nepal. So when she said that our way of life, our thinking, our culture, tradition is very friendly to nature, I totally understand that philosophy. However, I still want to ask, why is it important to talk about and preserve indigenous knowledge?
The indigenous knowledge is one of the pieces of knowledge that need to be preserved, because nobody knows best. So every piece of knowledge that contributes to nature is important. So indigenous knowledge provides the problem solving strategies for local community, especially for the poor. For example, when my parents first they immigrated to Thailand, they could not speak Thai, and we did not have much budget or money. So when we were sick, my mom decided not to take us to the hospital. Instead, she used indigenous knowledge to make the herbal medicine. So talking about indigenous knowledge and preserving indigenous knowledge is very important. So those knowledge can be passed down to the new generation. Yeah. Also, promoting and protecting indigenous knowledge is not only important for preserving cultural diversity, also for finding sustainable solutions to the environment challenges that we have faced today.
And I think you said it well. I think that there's so many reasons why it's very important to talk about Indigenous knowledge and preserve it. As Sunita said, like, it's about cultural diversity, and also Indigenous knowledge more and more in international circles like the UN and the Convention on Biological Diversity, for example. Indigenous knowledge and voices are becoming more and more recognized as being able to provide solutions for the global crises that we find ourselves in, especially the ecological crises. And how to live within our planetary limits. That being said, it's also like Indigenous knowledge is also beyond what the rest of the world can gain from Indigenous people. It's also a right. It's the right of Indigenous people to preserve and have their own knowledge systems, culture, language, way of life. So it's really important that we talk about it so that we can uphold the dignity and rights of Indigenous peoples.
So, in what ways do Indigenous women contribute to the preservation and transmission of traditional knowledge within their communities?
Okay, so from my side, there are many ways in which Indigenous women preserve and transmit their knowledge to their children, because women are more likely to take the lead in growing their kids. The knowledge that women transmit it. For example, I strongly believe that many people in current day, either women or men, they can weave like shirt, sarong, bag for themselves. So those weaving shirt or those things, they learn this one from like the mother, so woman. So yeah, this one can be like the benefit of the community, the people, the indigenous people over there, to like they can produce or create the shirt style from themselves without buying those from like other people, other country. Yes, also women teach the children how to cook, because indigenous people, they have like a technique or different recipe ingredient in cooking. Also how to produce herbal medicine. This one also from our women, because women, they have like many knowledge. They value the plant different from men, because they used to collect the plants a lot, so they know which one is good for like herbal medicine, which one is good for cooking. Also coloring fabric. This one also very interesting and very useful for our women, and to produce the color fabric for themselves. Yeah, I mean those knowledge will like how women contribute to how the way women preserve and knowledge and transmit those knowledge to other people in the community.
In Karen communities, knowledge is so tied to the land as well, and actually traditionally in Karen culture, land is passed down matrilineally. It's a hard word to say. So through the mother's line, basically. And so all of that knowledge is very much linked to the land and the raising of children, and women have such a huge role that is often not recognized.
That is interesting to know that land is passed down through the mother's side, and women's access to land is one of the most advocated issues in biodiversity conservation. So how does the inclusion of women in decision-making processes within Indigenous communities contribute to the sustainable management of natural resources and preservation of cultural heritage? How does everything tie or relate with each other at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think the inclusion of women in decision-making processes, as we've already talked about, women have their own unique knowledge, experience, relations with the natural world, and they have their own biocultural, ecological knowledge. So, I mean, it's clear then that women should be involved in making decisions about their communities and about the sustainable management of their natural resources. For example, the women may value and understand the value of different species within the forest compared to men. As Mumu mentioned before, maybe the women know more and value the plants that can be used to dye and to make clothes, or the herbal medicine. Women are traditionally the ones who are herbalists in current communities, or they value flowers differently on many different species, right? So that's why, for one, is so that when making decisions, communities have all the information necessary to make informed decisions about their natural resources. And also, one example of that, through some of the women's research we've done on which we can talk about in more detail, but one of the research that we've done is on orchids. And so in that report, basically the value of orchids for biodiversity, and also for orchids can also be a sign of, for example, when to start farming, because they're natural signals for seasonal change and things like that. And they also found out that there was some orchid trade that was happening, and from this orchid research report, the local community then came up with guidelines on how to prevent orchid trading in their community, which then kind of got raised with the KNU, and the KNU were able to enforce that local policy. So that is a very direct example of how women's knowledge can have very real consequences and influences on decision making around natural resources.
Okay, I do agree with Lottie, because as I say, after our women research teams have done the research on our case, so I think I see that many community leaders they respect our women research work, and then they want to include more our women in the every decision making in the local community level. Also, they respect the community our women research work, and then they see that throughout the research, our women team have doing their best to document the plants and those species which is important in their local. So yeah, this one you can see the women take the leader roles in our current community.
This is a great segue to your work in Salaween Peace Park while we talk about women and their relationship with the natural world. Please also tell us about Salaween Peace Park and why the forest is important for the Karen community.
So the Salaween Peace Park is an area of Indigenous conserved land, Indigenous conserved territories, that is in southeast Myanmar, in Kothule, Karen homeland. Specifically encompasses Mutor district. It's got some of the last remaining tracts of intact rainforest in the region, and there is a whole range of amazing biodiversity there. So there's breeding leopard populations, tigers, clouded leopards, gibbons, and we also have the Salaween River. All of this is in the Salaween River basin, which is Asia's longest free-flowing river. So all of this biodiversity is thanks to the protection of the custodianship of Indigenous communities for many generations. And so this biodiversity and the Indigenous people and the cultural heritage within the Salaween Peace Park is worth protecting. And the Salaween Peace Park offers a community-based alternative to like top-down militarized development that we'd seen previously in Myanmar, even through the peace process and democratic transition. There was a lot of threats to the ecological integrity of the Salaween Peace Park. So the Salaween Peace Park has three main pillars: cultural survival, ecological integrity, and peace and self-determination. And so there's a lot of work being done by communities under these three pillars, and the women's biodiversity research is one of these, contributing to ecological integrity and also cultural survival.
That sounds amazing. So how did the Women Research Group come to existence? And what are the challenges that they face?
Yeah, the Women's Research Group, they originally, many years back, we started with research, and that was predominantly men that were doing that research. And then once we realized that there was really there was a gap basically, because women have their own unique knowledge, then we set up this specific women's research team. We started doing we've done research on orchids, mushrooms, climate change. And right now we're doing research on ethnobotany species in the Salaween Peace Park. So we have a few key areas where we're doing those surveys, especially in the mountainous areas. So the types of forest are hill evergreen, montane, and pinus forest. And so far, we've found over 100 species, including wild orchids, plants, fish, reptiles, amphibians, and all which have a specific cultural use. So maybe that's herbal medicine or food or whatever it may be. It's important for the community. And that research is really important because we hope that it will feed into, in the same way that orchid research did, it will feed into policies and guidance and the way that communities are managing their customary territories. So this research is predominantly being done right now in community forests that are owned and managed by and cared for under the custodianship of the local communities. And the Women's Research Group does experience many challenges, actually, as Mumu said, when conducting the research. One of the sites, for example, we had to postpone because of the conflict that was affecting the security of that area. So yeah, there are many challenges being faced, but the communities do see it as this is a really important thing that they're doing, documenting their knowledge and contributing to kind of the sustainable management of the forests that they rely on for their survival. So that's the work that we've been doing, and it kind of it ties into the broader work that communities are doing and KESAN is supporting with the Salaween Peace Park. It's a pretty big area, and it's an area that I guess you can describe it as a tapestry of customary lands and indigenous customary lands that are managed through a democratic bottom-up governance structure.
So during their research, I think before start doing the research, our women research group have to talk to the local community over there, because even we have our consultant social promote to gather our women research team already, but every time maybe they go to the community forest side, they also still need to permission or talk to the leader over there. And also they still need a man as KFD or current forest department to lead them during the research, because not only they cannot do it only women. So for in terms of security, and also the men can lead the way, which way they should go or should not go. So another challenge is maybe because of the way the season, because sometimes it's too much raining. Also sometimes maybe they may see the insert or something that can be harmful our research team. So those things can be challenges for our research group. I think the best challenges may be modernizations, because indigenous knowledge disappears when the native strive of their lands. But in many parts of current community, knowledge also disappear because the young who are in contact with the outside world that have embraced the view that traditional ways and legitimate and relevant. Also, another challenge is displacement. For example, as I say, when my parents immigrated to Thailand, so I was born in Thailand. Then I do not know much about indigenous knowledge, or because we was born in Thailand, but my parents are indigenous people. So I have almost lost my traditional knowledge of about indigenous culture, indigenous language. So starting working with the KESAN and the Women Research Group, also with the local community, also inspired me to recreate my knowledge of transitional that had almost disappeared from me.
Sure, yeah. I mean, to add to that, like displacement, modernization, right? Maybe young people moving to the cities, but a lot of the displacement, certainly in the Karen context in Myanmar, is due to the conflict. So there has been conflict going on for 70 years now, more than 70 years. And sometimes the conflict has been more intense or less intense, but it's been a conflict and a struggle for self-determination for that many years. And so there has been a lot of displacement, either internally or to other countries. And you know, as I said before about culture being so tied to the land, when Karen people are displaced, they lose a lot of the traditional knowledge and culture and we can say sometimes identity as well. And there's also challenges that specifically Indigenous women face. So in Karen areas, they have a de facto government, a government of Karen areas, which is called the Karen National Union. And there is not equal representation yet of women in that government. But we are doing work as KESAN to try and kind of promote and empower more women in leadership positions. But there are, of course, like some kind of socio-cultural norms and barriers to work through around kind of making sure that women are leaders in their own decision-making and passing on of traditional knowledge. But really, and a lot of that is making the contributions of women more visible, because women are already at the forefront of passing down and preserving Indigenous knowledge. So it's about really recognizing and supporting their contributions already, which is a lot of the work we do with the Women's Research Group that I'm sure we'll talk about later.
Yeah. I think also why Indigenous knowledge that is disappear, because we have started using like the trade that are coming from the Western. We also start losing knowledge for making trades of our own. That's why doing research and documenting valuable knowledge and culture and giving more awareness of Indigenous knowledge can maintain Indigenous knowledge for the next generation. Yes.
Okay, so why was there a need to have a women research group with the specific focus on women?
This one we can give a very appreciation to our consultant, so Chapwemu, why he gathered our women research group. But actually, our women research group, how can they join our research? Because they start from volunteer to follow our consultant, so Chapwemu. After that, they saw that doing the research was very important to their community. So many women interested in doing the research. So they became a women research team. So they decided to go back and do research in their community. And also after the research, they have passion to publish as a documentary, also can share those information to the community over there, and also to do a policy or stop illegal orchids trade. Yeah, so this one they can create a policy and offer to the KNU local KNU leader over there. So they have many proposed ones is to document indigenous knowledge, also to create a policy to protect our current indigenous plants, and also for the last one, also to solve illegal orchids trade.
Yeah, to kind of, I guess it's like this research is figuring out what are the important species for Karen life. And then also part of that is also identifying threats.
Yeah, identify it. So how after the research also they can identify those species that a community can use for food, for herbal medicines. Yeah.
And then that can also feed into the other restoration work that communities are doing. For example, one of the women who's connected with the Women's Research Group, she has a tree nursery where she's kind of growing indigenous species of trees to plant in the forest. And this is also linked to our work in reforesting wildlife corridors so that wildlife can move through the Salaween Peace Park without disturbance and disruption. So all of this work is tied together really. It's about indigenous knowledge, biodiversity conservation, and also community leadership, and we're using women's leadership as a way to do that as well, because as Mumu said, it's not just women that are doing this research. We call it Women's Research Group because there's a lot of women involved, and it's about women's involvement and also recognizing women's unique knowledge and contributions. But there is men, there's young people, there's everyone in the community who can be involved and go and help carry out these biodiversity surveys as well. So it's really, we say women because that's what it is, but it's also like a community-based initiative, and I think that's really important to get across as well.
I am so glad to hear that, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will also be very happy to hear that it's a community effort, because it feels really good when it's a community effort. At the end of the day, that is what matters at the ground level. Well, I believe so. Okay, so we've reached the end of our podcast, but before we leave, Mumu, you attended the Article 8J meeting in November last year in Geneva. So the Article 8J of the Convention on Biological Diversity is about traditional knowledge, innovations, and practices for all our listeners out there. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience since you come from an Indigenous community yourself?
That was my first time, and I was like confused about what should I do and what they're talking about. But after that, I realized that there are many Indigenous people. They try to call out. How can I say? Yeah, they can try to call out for themselves, for their community rights, about land, about food, about their Indigenous knowledge. So this is very important when I would like to share those information with our women research team. I would like to let them know that what they are doing right now means something to their community. So I need to like empower our women research team a lot about this, because I think they're doing such amazing amazing work. Because as a year, our women are very still young, and I think they still have a chance to learn a lot. Because they need to like explore more, and then know that there are still like many Indigenous around the world. They try to fight for their right, and especially for women right. So yeah, WHA open my world maybe. So I saw something that I never believed that there's still many Indigenous people that they have their culture, they have their knowledge, language that we do not see, we do not know about that yet.
Right, and like you're doing such a good job of bridging that gap between these kind of bigger levels of advocacy or bigger discussions about Indigenous rights, women's rights, and also what women are doing on the ground in their communities every day. I think there's often a gap because women are often not recognized or not put, or often not in these higher levels, right? So it's very important that, and they don't necessarily have to be if they don't want to, but there has to be a bridging of the gap between this wisdom and this work that's happening on the ground and then what's happening at the international level, because decisions are being made at the local level, but they're also being made at the international level that does affect people's lives.
Thank you for staying with us until the end of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. If you want to learn more about the Women Research Group, then please visit KESAN's website www.kesan.asia. That's kesan.asia. If you wish to connect with us, do follow us on our social media. The handles are in the description box. Or write to us at communications@womenforbiodiversity.org. That is number 4 instead of FOR. So until the next episode, stay strong and carry on.